Hi, welcome back to the workshop for the next episode in the precision-based build. In the last episode we prepared and glued on the fretboard, and in this episode we're going to fit some frets and some tuners. Okay, but before I go too far with getting the frets into this neck, I just need to do a couple of little checks first to make sure that it's kind of within the ballpark for setup. So as we know, we've got a flat fretboard, but we've got a bit of a problem on the back of the neck, but that should be okay as long as the fretboard is presenting itself at the correct angle to the plane of the body. If the heel area, however, of the neck is at the wrong angle, that could tilt the neck one way or the other, which would mean we'd have problems setting this up. Now, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. We've got adjustment at the nut that we can make to an extent, and we've got quite a lot of adjustment at the bridge that we can make, and also if we absolutely had to, we could put a shim in the neck and adjust that angle. I'd rather not do that if I didn't have to, but it's something Fender did all the time. What I'm going to do to check this is I've bolted the neck in, I've put the bridge temporarily in roughly the right position, I've got the nut in very loosely, and I'm just going to run a straight edge from the nut slot to the bridge saddle and just have a look to see what the angle's like. And that is actually looking okay. They were broadly running parallel to the fretboard, so I think we're within the realms of being able to set this guitar up. So that gives me the confidence I need to strip this back down and continue working on the neck. Okay, so there's a few things we need to do on this neck before it can go onto the body for good. Obviously it needs a carve to turn it from a square piece of wood into a neck-shaped thing. But what I'm going to tackle in this episode is getting the headstock thinned and transitioned. So at the moment it's quite a bit thicker than it needs to be, and also we need to put the transition in between where the nut would go and the plane of the headstock. I'm also going to trial fit the tuners and the string button, and then I'm going to get the frets into the neck. Now, I'm not going to dress the frets at this stage. I'm going to get them in, get them trimmed down and get the ends kind of beveled over and cleaned up, but I'm going to save leveling the frets until after I've carved the neck itself. My reasoning behind that is I've had nothing but trouble with this neck blank, and I've got a suspicion that when I remove material off the back to get the carve done, there is a chance that it's going to move again. If I level the frets before I do that, I've kind of used up that opportunity of correction, whereas if it does move slightly, I can adjust the truss rod, straighten things back up again, and then dress the frets, and we know we're in the ballpark for a decent setup. So first things first, I'm going to put some pilot holes in the headstock using the template for the tuners and mark out from there where the string button's going to be. Once I've got those pilot holes in place, I will then thin out the rest of this material. Ordinarily, I'd do that on the bandsaw, but this base headstock is too big to go into my bandsaw, so I'm going to have to be a little bit more creative in how I go about that. Okay, so all I've done there is I've simply positioned the template on top, and again I've used a small transfer punch to punch through a hole that I've drilled in the template to mark on the back of the headstock. I've just checked those then with a ruler and they line up really nicely. So it's just a case now of getting them onto the drill press and putting a small pilot hole through there. Okay, with those pilot holes drilled, I've now got a reference point on the front of the headstock so I can determine where it is that I need to put the string tree. And I've actually figured this out on the template. So if I square a line through the A tuner hole from the edge of the headstock, measure over 19 millimeters square another line down, and then from my centre line it's 27 millimeters down to the centre of the hole for the string tree. This doesn't have to be absolutely precise, but it will give me a good idea of where I need to be. It's not 27 millimeters from my centre line, it's 27 millimeters from the line of the tuner holes. That could have gone wrong. Okay, so I haven't gone in very deep with that. I've just gone in so that I know I'm deeper than the material that I'm going to remove to get this down to thickness. So that's that element done for the time being. Now to get this down to thickness, I think I'm going to rely a lot on my spindle sander. So I'll set a fence up on that as I've done previously and thickness it down that way. But there's a lot of material that needs to come off. This element here, there's probably a good 3.5, 4 millimeters that needs to come down. So that's going to take a long time to sand off. So I'm going to try in the first instance to get a plane and just smooth some of this out. In the end, I managed to get virtually everything with the hand plane, and I only really had to do a tiny little bit of this transition with the spindle sander. So next up is to break out the DA sander and just kind of sand this down, probably to about 150 grit, just to get it nice and flat and smooth. Okay, so that's all sanded now. It's nice and smooth, transition's all nice, so I'm happy with that. I don't think my sander's going to last much longer. It's making some really horrible noises, but there you go. Right, with that done, I think it's time to get the tuners fitted. Okay, so it turns out I don't have the right size drill bit to do the tuner bushings, but I've got one on order. That will be coming tomorrow, so we can crack on with it then. But I do have the drill bit to do the next bit I want to do on the headstock, which is to put a little walnut plug in to replicate what would have been there on a traditional one-piece neck. So to do that, first thing I need to do, get it in the vise. And I've got a really nice long drill bit to get this started. It's not quite big enough, but it'll at least get us on the right track. Then I'm just going to open that out a little bit to 9 millimeters. That little bit of dowel fits really nicely in there, so I'm just going to break out the tight bond and get that glued in. Okay, so that's the little walnut plug in place at the end of the headstock. I'm thinking that's kind of looking quite nice. Happy with that. So now we can move on to the next job, which is to get the frets in. Now we've already established that the fret slots are deep enough. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a very small triangular file and just open up the top of those fret slots slightly. Just to lead the tang of the fret in when we come to put them in. And then next we're going to have to prepare and cut down some fret wire. So the first stage in that is to take my little homemade fret bending jig. And some of this wire has already been pre-radiused, but I've got a couple of bits that just need doing. Okay, and then we just need to take our nippers and cut the frets roughly to size. And once again, so we don't get them mixed up, I'll be using my little fret holder. So with those cut, I'm simply going to take my fretting hammer, which is nothing more than a soft face mallet, and start getting these in. Now I've been through this before a couple of times. This is my particular way of doing it. Other people do it a different way, but I start by giving it a couple of smart taps on the edges, and then working my way out from the centre and knocking it down. And you can see if they're down, but I run a fingernail along that, and you'll feel if there's any of the fret isn't where it needs to be. Okay, so that's all the frets knocked in, but as you can see, they're substantially longer than they need to be. So I'm just going to take my snips now and trim these off. Now, when I cut these frets initially, I didn't really pay much attention to which way I cut it. Sometimes I cut it across the fret, sometimes I nipped it top to bottom. It just depends on how I was able to get at it. But when I'm trimming them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim them from side to side of the fret. And the reason I do that is that it'll cut the tang nice and cleanly. If I did it top to bottom, it could deform the tang and it'll leave you with a messy looking fret end once you've cleaned everything up. You can't always do it on 6-string necks because obviously the frets are spaced much closer together down this end of the neck, so you can't always get your cutters in there, but on a bass I think I should be okay. Okay, so they're all trimmed off now, but they are still absolutely lethal. If you tried to play this bass now, you would lacerate yourself. So the next step is to get a file and to just flush all these fret ends off. Okay, and with all those fret ends flattened off, next up, you take a file, and I've got this block of wood, and it's got an angle cut on one side and a slot cut through it that the file will fit in, and I'm simply going to run the wooden section along the top of the frets and then use the file to bevel the ends of the frets over. That only takes a few strokes. But it gets the frets much closer to where you need them. Now that's a lot better, but they're still nowhere near where they need to be. But I'm going to leave it for the time being and then come back to these once I've leveled them, and then we can think about dressing the fret ends properly. Okay, so my delivery came this morning. I've got the 18mm Forstner bit that I need to put the recesses in for the ferrules that go around the tuner. So I'm going to drill these out now. I've just checked with a straight edge and these holes are in line, so we're good to go on there. I'm going to do this in 3 phases. I'm going to drill the front with the 18mm bit until I've recessed this enough for that bushing to fit. I'll then drill probably just over halfway with the 14mm bit that clearances the actual shaft of the tuner, and then once I've done all of those, I'll turn them over and just finish off from the back side with the 14mm bit. Okay, onto the drill press. Okay, so let's see how we've done. Well, that's a nice fit. That's a really nice fit. I'm pleased with that. It's snug without being so tight that you have to really whack it in. Obviously they'll come in and out a couple of times before we've done, and there'll also be some lacquer build up on there which will give it a really nice tight fit. So that's good, that's a good start. And there we go, tuner fits great. Now I've never fitted these tuners before, but I'm assuming that just squares from the back of the headstock against the tuner plate, and you're in the right position. So I'm just going to stick this in the vise. And mark this up. And there we have it, the fretted and tuner fitted neck. I think that looks really nice. I'm really pleased with the way that's come out. I especially like the little fake walnut plug. I think it's only a little detail, but it's kind of the icing on the cake for the headstock. So yeah, happy with that. So I think we can call this element done. I'll get busy stripping the tuners and everything back off, and then we can start making preparations for the neck carve. So I'm going to go away, dig out my saw rasp, make a couple of templates for the carving of this neck, and I'll be back with you in a couple of days with that video. As always, thanks a lot for taking the time out to watch this. If you've enjoyed it, give it a like. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.